Hello and welcome to NewsClick. The Pakistan Supreme Court has struck down the National Reconciliation Ordinance and with it the immunity from prosecution charges laid against President Zardari and many of his senior political and bureaucratic colleagues. This has thrown Pakistan once again into turmoil, throwing open familiar fissures in Pakistan between the political establishment, the executive, the judiciary, and perhaps the military. To discuss the implications of these developments, we have with us today Professor Aijaz Ahmad, well-known political commentator on international affairs. So Aijaz, with the revocation of the N.R.O, many cases against President Zardari and his senior cabinet colleagues are likely to be revived. Is President Zardari likely to quit or be forced to lay down office? And will this destabilize the Pakistan polity?
Well, whether or not the cases against Zardari would be revived is still not clear because the National Accountability Bureau is studying two questions. One, whether or not this immunity that he has as president covers the cases against him which were filed well before he became the president. And second, whether or not the Supreme Court order requires the National Accountability Bureau to go in for prosecution for the international cases against him. So that is unclear. Whether or not he will resign, as of now, he has said no. And Nawaz Sharif, the main leader of the opposition, has said that it's really up to him what he wishes to do. The latest news today is that there has been an understanding between Nawaz Sharif and Zardari that Zardari will remain president, Nawaz Sharif will not lead any kind of agitation against him, and Zardari, on his part, will give up the extraordinary powers for the president that the Musharraf had written into the constitution, and the most important of which is the presidential power to abrogate parliament. So no, I don't expect him to resign. I think the N.R.O has created three institutional sort of crises in Pakistan. One is between the judiciary and the executive. Historically, the executive in Pakistan has always dominated the judiciary and dominated the judiciary. Now, with the N.R.O, the judiciary seems to have now come to a position which is where it is dictating to the executive as to how it is to act, and is directing the National Accountability Bureau to take all kinds of action.
Right. If Zardari is not going to resign, or if there is a modus vivendi agreed between him and the opposition, then a subject of much discussion in Pakistan and abroad has been whether or not the army is going to intervene. But if there is a modus vivendi within the political establishment, then presumably the pressure on the army to step in may not be there.
I don't think there is any chance whatsoever of the army intervening at this time. How things will unfold, we don't know. What has certainly happened is that the power equation between Ashfaq Kiani, the military command, the chief of the armed forces, and Zardari has been again transformed in favor of Mr. Kiani. Right. So that the army will now have a much freer hand to do what it wishes to do, not by way of intervening in politics. Kiani's term ends at the end of the coming year. He has another year to go as the head of the armed forces. How things will evolve between now and then, we don't know. But the third thing that has happened, Raghu, is that what the same order has done is to shift the balance between the presidency and the prime minister.
It's often been argued in Pakistan that an activist judiciary has contributed in some senses to a destabilization of the Pakistan polity. The argument being that precisely what you were saying. Once the judiciary intervenes, the executive can get weakened because there is a check now on their powers, and once the executive gets weakened, then the political establishment starts fragmenting. And it's been argued that this has given an opportunity for the military to resurface. Now, while this may not happen in very dramatic terms now, but as you said, the balance of power between these forces does seem to be shifting from that point of view. Could you sort of go into this aspect a little bit?
Judiciary has historically gone along with certainly the military dictatorships. The Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, did something quite unusual under Musharraf when he raised the question of the disappearances of people. Over 2,000 or so people had disappeared, and he called upon the armed forces and the ISI and so on to come forward and give an accounting to that, for which he was immediately dismissed. Then came the lawyers' movement and so on and so forth. So historically, actually, the judiciary has gone along with military dictatorships, certainly. Now what has happened is that, on the one hand, the corruptions of these people have really been notorious. The only question is, has the judiciary now overstepped its bounds in terms of the balance of powers between the executive and the judiciary? My sense is that there is a very strong pressure in Pakistani civil society, as it were, to restrain the judiciary before getting into a situation where there is a complete political chaos. So as of now, I don't see a kind of collision between the armed forces and between the judiciary and the executive, which calls for an intervention.
So the present juncture and the kind of new balances being struck between different arms of the Pakistani state, are these in the short to medium term likely to strengthen or weaken Pakistan's fledgling democratic institutions?
Well, it is a very good question, Raghu, and we don't know. The historic tendency in Pakistan's institutions, executive as well as judiciary, especially the executive, has been to constantly overstep its own bounds. That has been true certainly of the armed forces, but also of the rulers. I mean, Nawaz Sharif got a High Court judge beaten up on the premises of the High Court. Now, the most interesting part of this judgment to me is that the Chief Justice has established monitoring cells in the higher judiciary to expedite these actions, and 247 persons or so have been put on the list who can't travel abroad and so on and so forth, and among whom are their
senior ministers of the cabinet,
interior and defense ministers. Right. You know, now whether people will step back and all the institutions will act in a restrained manner or not, we don't know. Pakistan's previous history is not very promising.
Let me ask you at the end, how are these developments going to impact on the internal battle in Pakistan of the state, the army against extremism within Pakistan? And how does it then also impact on relations with India and the efforts at a rapprochement?
I think that in this area particularly, the balance is shifted entirely in favor of the armed forces. The original American formula was to have a figurehead president, an active prime minister, but the war being prosecuted by the military forces. That formula may still be working, with Zardari becoming a figurehead, sure, Gilani becoming a real prime minister.
But does that encourage the army to act more strongly against extremists, or the other way around?
It strengthens their position, their bargaining position with the United States. Right. Zardari was going to give the Americans everything they wanted.
Sure.
The armed forces
will not,
and their position is strengthened, which means that they will move against the extremists in the fashion that they find judicious in their long-term strategic view.
And how is India going to view these developments?
My sense is that in India, we have made a terrible mistake, which is we suspended all negotiations and effective relationships with Pakistan after Bombay. This weakening of Zardari and the strengthening of Gilani may actually create a situation in which we do have a partner to talk to, if we are willing to take that opportunity. I think India should have a consistent view, policy of engaging Pakistan, whoever happens to be in power at the time.
Thank you very much, Aijaz.